Hello everyone, this is a briefing on Assessment 4 Resolution, the final assessment for Design Practice 8 Resolve. This assessment task is worth 60% in total and it's due on week 13, day 1. So it's due on the Monday, not on the Thursday. The breakdown of the assessment task is into two parts. The first is the actual design presentation, so your pin up on the wall and your verbal presentation, and that is worth 50%. The second part is the design book, and that accompanies the design presentation. This is worth 10%, and I'll talk through each of these in the briefing today. So, what is this assessment task about? What is the focus? This assessment task focuses on synthesizing the knowledge that you've gained over Design Practice 7 and Design Practice 8 and resolving your proposals for the project. We're asking you to demonstrate an understanding of your proposal and a resolution of the proposal in terms of a series of components that we've been exploring in each assessment task through Design Practice 7 and 8. These include an ability to resolve the master plan, the architectural gesture, the interior kind of room scale space, materials, lighting, furniture, and bespoke details. The difference in Assessment 4 when compared to Assessment 1, 2 and 3 is that there is much more freedom for you to hold the reins here. So we're asking you to critically reflect on the most appropriate communication vehicles for you to tell us the story of your project narrative and your position as a designer. Where would you like to be when you graduate? And how will this project be a means of acting as a stepping stone towards getting there? We'd like you to reflect on these two components in terms of how you, as a designer, might contribute to the future of interiors within 21st century cities. So DP7 and DP8 are there to provide a platform for you to explore these three components. So again, your job is to think about which communication technique or techniques work best in describing your project and in describing you as a designer. Some key considerations in Assessment 4. Who is your audience? So your tutors will be there and I will be there as the convener, but we will also have people there who have never seen your project. They will know the project brief in general, but they won't have been there to witness the development of your project. So you need to think carefully, how do you pitch your ideas to an audience who has not been part of the development of your proposal? How do you kind of sell your ideas and your spatial propositions? If I refer a little bit to Laura and Lauren's talk over a few points here, one that they both made in thinking about how you present your project is to begin by considering and communicating, why does your project proposal make sense in the site and in the broader context of the city? So tell us and show us, why and how does your proposal make sense for La Perouse and more broadly for the 21st century city and the social and cultural issues that you've explored at each of these scales, so in both the site and in terms of the city in general. Secondly, what is your project narrative? So what research and ideas have guided your design thinking and your design decision making throughout both DP7 and DP8? And these ideas likely will have shifted and changed and evolved along the way. That's okay. Lose the ones that are not important anymore. Be clear on those that have relevance now in communicating the key and best parts of your scheme. So that's the project and the project narrative. We then need to think on how you might want to position yourself as a designer. So think, who are the designers that you look up to? Who are the design firms that you would love to work for? And I think be really aspirational. Look beyond Sydney, look across Australia, look around the world. What type of work do they do? And then also think about what your strengths are and where you would like to be in your future career. And that doesn't have to be 1 year out. It might also be 10 years out, 15 years out, 20 years out. So are you positioning yourself as a design thinker? Are you positioning yourself as a design researcher? Are you positioning yourself as a design visionary that sees the big picture, but not so much the tiny details? Are you positioning yourself as someone who loves the tiny details and would rather someone else do the big picture stuff? Are you positioning yourself as a design communicator who understands strategy and how to kind of sell a project? Are you positioning yourself as someone who can do a bit of everything? Think about this as well as the project yourself in the final presentation. And then remember to gear your presentation and your talk to the assessment criteria, because that's what we as tutors and myself as a convener will be looking for. So the assessment criteria builds on criteria that you will now be very familiar with from Assessment 1, Assessment 2, and Assessment 3. The criteria is broken up into 2 parts. So 50% we look at the design presentation, 10% we look at the design book. I'll go through first the design presentation. So the design presentation, we are examining design intent and resolution. We're looking at the design idea, your ability to respond to the intended use, so the typology or the function of space, and the intended users of the space in your spatial decisions. We're looking at your ability to create a considered dialogue between new and extant structures. We're looking at your ability to engage with the large scale, so master planning and architectural gesture. We are looking at your ability to engage with the smaller scale, so room scale interior propositions. We are looking at your ability to engage with material resolution in a considered manner, at detailed design in a considered manner, and at joinery, furniture, and lighting in a considered manner. So again, these draw from Assessment 1, 2, and 3, reflect back on the feedback that you've been given at each of these, and try to apply your learnings in Assessment 4. The second part of the design presentation of Assessment 4 is crafting communication and professionalism. So this is worth 20% of the 60%. So again, we're looking at how well you have communicated your design intent. So not the design intent itself, putting that aside, how clearly and evocatively have you communicated it? How clearly and evocatively have you communicated the large-scale spatial experience? How clearly and evocatively have you communicated the room-scale interior experience? How clearly and evocatively have you communicated the detailed design? And how well have you communicated not just the end product, but your design thinking and your process? It's really key that you're demonstrating both parts of this project. And finally, Does your presentation demonstrate a pre-professional level of design and crafting? Could we present this to a client and charge for it? The final 20% of the 60% is creativity. So creativity can be defined as a demonstrated capacity to combine or synthesize existing ideas, images, or expertise in original ways. We are looking at how you have drawn together disparate pieces of research and ideation in your design proposal, but also in the graphic presentation of the design proposal. So we're looking at those two aspects in creativity. The design book makes up 10% of the 60%. So there are three criteria that we're examining here. One, does your design book present a pre-professional level of design and crafting? Does it present a clear and comprehensive summary of the two-term project? I note that in the course outline it says a 24-week project. We're not considering this a 24-week project. We appreciate that the 3-term structure is shorter and this is a 2-term project. Finally, is the design statement succinct, well written and clear in communicating the design strategy? So there's some of the key principles in terms of what you might consider in pulling together your presentation and in what we consider as an audience who are reflecting on and marking your presentations. When you look at the deliverables in the course outline, you'll see that they are much less explicit than in assessments past. This is intentional. The deliverables are there as a guide. And if I quote the course outline for a second, your design presentation is open format. You need to decide on the most effective, appropriate, and eloquent manner to communicate both your thinking and your design skills, as embodied both in the development or process and in the resolution or product of the entire project proposal, from master plan down to one-to-one. The rationale behind the deliverables are that framework for deliverables is there to allow you to showcase your ability to engage well with design research, the development of a design idea, and also the application, so the practical application of the design idea through spatial proposition. The deliverable framework is there to allow you to showcase the proposal as a whole and in terms of its parts, and to demonstrate the relationship between these, from a macro scale down to a micro scale. There were some comments and questions about the new 3-term structure and the reduced amount of time that you have in comparison to years past. I do want to emphasize in response to this that those deliverables are there as a framework or a guide, and that what we are looking for is quality, not quantity. We need you to demonstrate your ability to engage with and evidence the assessment criteria, or your engagement with the assessment criteria. We're not there to check off whether you have 10 plans, 5 sections, 2 models. We need you to think in a clever manner about how you use the skills that you have to demonstrate your engagement with the assessment criteria. So I'd be going through that criteria and checking off against the communicative tool that you'll use to demonstrate engagement with that criteria. Again, quality, not quantity. Do less well. So for this, I would suggest you think clearly about what are the key ideas and strengths of my project. How do I eloquently and efficiently communicate these, right? So it doesn't need to be lots. You need to think strategically about how you efficiently communicate your ideas and strengths. So if we go through the deliverable framework, first of all, for assessment 4A, the design presentation, the first part is the synthesis of project research. So this is really a reflection on both DP7 and DP8, and we need you to tell us how have you responded to research that has examined the site, to research that has examined the brief and your definition of the brief, to research of stakeholder needs and expectations. Suggested ways that you might communicate this are design diagrams, diagrams as GIFs, so they could be dynamic rather than static and two-dimensional, and design drawings. Again, that's just a suggestion. This is up to you in terms of how you'd like to communicate this research. The second part is the presentation of your actual brief. So tell us, in 150 words or less, what is your broad vision for the project ethos? Have a little Google search of museums around the world. They all will have a vision statement. And then the project framework. So you did this towards the end of DP7. What is the typology of space that you are designing? And this will be a collection of typologies. What is the framework for responding to the stakeholder? The framework for responding to the site? The framework for responding to the needs of a 21st century city, to the needs of Sydney, to the needs of La Perouse? Set out the key elements of your brief so that the audience who may not have seen your project before clearly understands the framework and are then able to contextualize your spatial response in engaging with that framework. So we then move through a series of scales from broad to quite small. The direction in which you talk through and present these scales is completely up to you, and it doesn't have to be from macro to micro. So if we talk first of all about the master plan, you need to tell us about the broad vision, the overall planning of the site. This means, how have you engaged with structures, architectural gestures, circulation and landscape, both existing and proposed, in the overall site context? Some suggestions for how you can communicate this are context plans, master plans as diagrams, axonometrics that kind of look at the site as a whole and potentially explode the key parts of that site, a site model. The course outline does say a 1 to 200 site model. This might be used to show the architectural gesture. You might be looking at a 1 to 2,000 or a 1 to 5,000 site model, so that could be quite small, almost A4 sized or smaller, to show the key parts of the scheme. We then step down from the broad master plan to the architectural gesture, and these overlap a little bit. So how do the structures, both existing and proposed, fit within their immediate site context? For this, we suggest you might explore 1 to 500 or 200 sections. Again, axonometrics that might show the existing building and proposed additions plus surrounding landscape. A 1 to 200 precinct model, similar to what you did at the end of DP7. We step down again in terms of scale. We're looking at your 6 key spaces and your ability to demonstrate control over the room scale interior. So for this, we suggest that you are showing it in use, so with people, with illumination, lighting, natural and artificial, and with an engagement of, or a kind of real control over detailed material composition. So this, you'll be using your assessment 3 perspectives potentially as a basis and developing them up. You could also be using rendered plans, rendered sections, and this is where the 1 to 20 or 1 to 50 sectional model can come into play in demonstrating quite clearly your three-dimensional understanding of interior detail and relationships between extant and proposed form and interior and exterior spaces. If we step down again in scale, we're looking at how you are engaging with joinery, furniture and lighting in a bespoke sense. So, how do you show this? Again, you might be pulling key pieces of joinery, key material details, key lighting elements that you have designed and that are specific to your project from your perspectives, from your drawings. You could also be highlighting these in your 1 to 20 and 1 to 50 sectional models. And finally, we're looking at fine-grain bespoke design details from those 6 key spaces. So you could be integrating these details or pulling them out from the perspectives or drawings. Some students in previous years have also developed a little book that accompanies the presentation with all of the design details within here, or a set of cards. You know, there are many ways that you can do this, but all of the design details don't have to be up on the wall. The second part of the assessment, so assessment 4B, is the design book itself, and this is worth 10%. You should perceive this as a supplementary book. So it's there to provide further detail for the audience, and you would consider this the client, the stakeholders, the community, almost like an appendix to explain and flesh out the project in a little bit more detail. For this, we're suggesting a contents page, a project overview and that design statement, the summary report from DP7, so the one that you did at the end of DP7, developed in terms of your project development in DP8, a reduced architectural drawing set, selected images or perspectives from the presentation, images of your models, images of your detailed design works, and representation of materials, furnishing, lighting, and objects. This is a really useful exercise because it's intended to form the basis of your portfolio. So this is a little means of getting you to explore both a kind of big format design presentation as well as a reduced format design book to present research, design thinking, and spatial application. So again, drawing on Laura and Lauren's talk, the way that you arrange all of these elements on the wall and the way that you talk to them is completely up to you. You might work from very small scale to very large scale. You might tic-tac between research and spatial application, research and spatial application. You might tic-tac between process and finalized product. You might tic-tac between architecture, interior, detail, master plan, architecture, interior, detail, master plan. So think strategically about how you pin your work up or showcase your work in a digital format on the wall and how you will actually talk through this in your presentation. Remember that there is hierarchy in visual presentation. So your perspectives don't all have to be the same size. Your plans don't all have to be at the same scale. Your details don't all have to be at the same scale. Think about the important parts of the scheme in terms of their size on the wall. Think about the key messages that you're trying to tell your audience about the scheme. Remember also, you have 2 terms of work that you've developed. A great point from Sarah, our demonstrator. Step 1, lay out every piece of work that you have developed over DP7 and DP8. What have you done? How has the project developed? What can you actually reuse as a basis for your final presentation? Plan your talk. So, the day will work so that you have 7 minutes to present you'll have 7 minutes of feedback, and then there will be 1 minute changeover. You really need to think about the key parts and key strengths of your proposal and focus on hitting those as the main parts of your verbal narrative. Think about your point of difference. So we're going to be listening to 15, 20 presentations, so each tutor over the day. How does your design proposal differ to that of your peers? What is your point of difference in terms of your engagement with La Perouse, your engagement with the 21st century city, your engagement with the future of interiors? So how will presentation day work? I'll talk through this today, as well as in a little bit more detail in next week's lecture. The first is a reminder that presentation day is on Monday, the 26th of August. I have booked the Square House from 10 o'clock until 3 o'clock. So we have pin-up time from 10 until 10:50. And presentations will begin at 11 a.m. sharp. Square House Studios, we have rooms 103 and 104, so that's where we currently have our studios, as well as the annex space that connects those two. We also have the CATS rooms, so 114 and 115. So I will split each of the groups, the tutors and the guest critics, across each of those spaces, and I'll communicate that when we get closer to the date. What to do between your last class and the submission. Take breaks, sleep well, and back up your work. Take breaks in particular. So I've just been reading a book about Charles Darwin, and what it talks about is the model of working in 90-minute blocks with a 15-minute break. 90-minute block, 15-minute break. In principle, this is a way to keep your mind refreshed and to keep you focused on your tasks that are achievable in that 90-minute block. So remember breaks. Remember how much more effectively you work when you have slept well. Remember the stress that is reduced when you back up your work in case your work is lost. Also remember, this is not the be-all and end-all of your academic life as a student or of your career as a designer. In many ways, this is just another design presentation. And I think for me, it helps to ease the pressure by considering this submission and this project in that way. We don't want you to be so stressed about it that you're not enjoying it. Enjoy it. You're designers. You know, many of you talk with such passion about your love for different aspects of the design process. Don't forget that in the final stages of this project. And don't forget that this is quite a small stepping stone in your career as designers, you know, that will span a really long time. Some parts will work in the project, some parts won't, and you'll learn from it. And I think if you can remember that, it allows you to work a little bit more effectively because you take the pressure off. Also remember, you are so close. So plan some things that you're going to do after the presentation. Have that as the light at the end of the tunnel. You're nearly there, and we're there to support you along the way. I will be there for consultations after our last tutorial if needed. Good luck, and I will see you all on Thursday.